Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in Arise analyst Dr. Constance Ikwoku. Good morning, Dr. Constance.
Hey, Yolanda. Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm great. Lovely to see you after that
Good morning, Doc. Oh, we're matchy-matchy.
Good morning, Bimbai. They're in Lagos.
Good morning, Dr. Constance Ikwoku.
I hope you don't feel alone in the studio, Bimbai, in Lagos.
I'm feeling very lonely and I'm jealous because I think you guys had a great independence without me, but it's okay.
Lonely at the top.
I know. Sorry. Hopefully
Which top, Jerry? We are still managing, trying to get there.
Yeah. Hopefully at this I'll be back soon. Good morning, Benga, and good to see everyone.
Likewise.
All right, let's get to business. Hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with This Day. In This Day today, we're getting or hearing more information about the circumstances of the death of our dear colleague, Somtochukwu Somi Maduagu. According to investigation by the police, Somi plunged to death from the 3-story apartment where she lived during an armed robbery attack. The Federal Capital Territory Police Commissioner Ajao Adewale explained that Somi jumped out following the attack. If you have seen the footages of that apartment building, it's quite high. It's a 3-story building with 18 flats in the Katampe area of Abuja. We also gather it's a developing area, so maybe it's quite porous. The police did get to the scene. She was taken to the hospital. There were attempts to resuscitate her. Unfortunately, she passed. Adeola says the police command is on a manhunt of the robbers. Hopefully, they will be apprehended. Condolences again to the family. Condolences are pouring in. Her parents and family, as you can imagine, are totally distraught. Again, may her soul rest in peace. I mean, I saw her on Sunday at the office. She was in her corner, preparing for her show. And the next day when I got to the office again, I was told that she was gone. So sad. Vimbai, would you like to start us and to say a word on this?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Constance. Very briefly, I think we all continue to mourn this huge tragedy that has now drawn national attention, and rightfully so, because there's so many issues around what transpired there that resonate with so many people in all parts of Nigeria. Whether it be, insecurity, whether it be, the conversation around how responsive we really are. Are we prepared for these emergencies when they happen? I was fortunate enough to have spoken to one of her neighbors who was also robbed on that night, and she shared her harrowing experience of how they barged into her apartment and they took a few things. She begged and pleaded with these armed robbers to just let her be, and fortunately for her, they did let her be, but unfortunately, our Somi didn't have that same luck. So all we can appeal for now is that these perpetrators are brought to book. They must be found, they must be caught, they must be persecuted. And we want to see the conclusion of that case. We want to see them being punished for what they have done. This is not a story that should just be swept under the carpet, that should just die, with headlines over the days. This is something we must continue to stay on until justice is served. It doesn't bring her back, but that justice is important for closure.
Absolutely. May her soul rest in peace again.
Amen.
We will stay with This Day and look at more stories on the independence anniversary. Tinubu canvasses new orientation, urges Nigerians to lift, believe, put country first, inaugurates newly renovated National Theatre named after Professor Wole Soyinka. The president asked Nigerians not to be cynical about their country and warned against negative narratives and emphatically declared that Nigeria will succeed. While Nigeria may well succeed in the long run, it has all it takes to do so. The question is, when will this be? What will be the casualties along the way? And what will be the nature of that success? Questions again, do our so-called leaders believe in Nigeria? Do they put the country first? Do their actions match these statements that they are offering to Nigerians? Do they lead by example? Your takeaway from this speech, Benga?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think the president is quite on point, naming the National Theatre after Nigeria's literary icon and Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka. The National Theatre is a national symbol. And we know the historical, for some of us who grew up visiting the National Theatre, it's a symbol and a custodian of cultural monuments and very high significance. We go there to watch mostly epic movies then, and it was quite an unforgettable experience. Back to the president calling on Nigeria. Well, I think we don't have a choice. We've gotten to that point of Hobson's choice now, where we all know that we are now stakeholders in the Nigerian project, considering the aggressive tendencies we've seen outside Nigeria, from US to different countries on their stance on migrant policy. We have no choice than to put all hands on deck and to make Nigeria work. But be that as it may, so many questions. The leaders showing examples, are they inspiring enough? What are the dreams of the founding fathers? Where have we gotten ourselves today? The president talked about the state of education, where there were 120 schools at the time of independence, and now there are about several thousands of schools now, hundreds of thousands of schools now, secondary schools now. But the question is, what are the quality of education being churned out for these students? What kind of, are they just coming out as a certificate holders? The two universities then could be compared to all the best universities in the world. Then the people still, I recall that my deputy managing director, Mr. Bayo Owushemo, used to share his experience at the Obafemi Awolowo University, where they treat them like kings and queens, serve them quality meals, and the state of infrastructure at the school was second to none. So you could imagine the quality of graduates that will come out of such school. Then we have the economy. The cost of governance is the president showing example. We commend him. We've had some. Is really commendable managing what I would call a fragile economy, considering what he met on ground, which he explained had been decades of government failure. So when you look at many of these things, the trade surplus, which is 44%, the best in about 5 years, the GDP, which has risen 4.23%, the best in about 6 years too. We have the foreign reserve, which has risen to $42 billion. And so we have a headline inflation that has also come down to 20.12%. So with all these indices, but we need, it's a call for urgent action. That is what Nigerians are saying, so that the figures would really match up with what's on the table, will really match up to uplifting the status of living for the common man. Thank you, Dr. Constance.
You know, Wenga, when you think about it, or when you look at what's happening in Nigeria, it seems like the entity Nigeria is a commodity to be abused. People go in there and make money from Nigeria, but do not respect Nigeria. And this includes the leaders, and that's why I asked the question. You are asking this of your population. What are your own activities, and what are the things that you do to show that you, first of all, believe in Nigeria, so that people can follow your example? Very big question. Let's take a third story from this day. The window story here says, U.S. government shuts down as Congress fails to reach new funding deal. This shutdown is not the first to occur. It is putting the U.S. economy under peril, and we're already seeing the consequences of the failure of Republicans and Democrats to reach a spending bill, or to agree on a spending bill. Employers are already shedding jobs. Yolanda, talk us through this, please.
Well, I reiterate my points from yesterday when we spoke about this. You know, the news broke yesterday about how the U.S. was shutting down. And one of the things I had said was that this is not an arbitrary decision. It's not something that just happens naturally. It's something that was actually anticipated. And this is the second time that this is happening in the United States. The first time was in 2018, ironically still under the Trump administration. And at that time, it was over the border wall funding. That was where all the ruckus came about. And I believe that that shutdown lasted about 35 days. So we're also waiting to see how long this shutdown will last. Hopefully not as long as the last one. But what is definitely going to happen, and what we see already beginning, is that workers are being put on a furlough. You know, they're being sent home. They're not being dismissed. They're not being fired. But the government is saying, for the meantime, we cannot retain you. We cannot afford to pay you. But at the same time and in the same breath, there are other agencies and ministries that are essential and have to keep working. So I really just hope that Congress is able to come to a quick decision, because at the end of the day, it's the everyday person who suffers. It's the everyday person who is out of a job, unable to feed their families, unable to pay rent. And it's a very unfortunate situation and a tough time for the U.S. economy at the moment.
Yeah, you know, general citizens in the U.S.
It certainly is, and I'm glad.
Oh, okay, please come in.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the economy, because the analysts are saying that you know, the likely loss to GDP would go up to about $15 billion per week, depending on how long this shutdown continues. But you know, the impasse is still on, because of course the deadlock is all about Obamacare, and the Republicans are accusing the Democrats of using Obamacare to treat illegal aliens. And so they're saying that, you know, as long as this is being used for illegals, and of course we know the Trump administration's position on illegal immigrants, then they want to withdraw it because it should only benefit Americans. The Democrats, of course, are saying that's not true. So it's one of those back and forth. But I think after we saw what happened with the big, beautiful bill and how it took J.D. Vance's intervention as that singular vote of the vice president to break that deadlock to get the big, beautiful bill passed, this, as Yolanda said, was highly anticipated. This was definitely something we knew would happen. But now the question is, Republicans are saying the Democrats have done this intentionally, and because of that, they are now punishing the Democrats. So you have a number of Democrat states that are now having funding withdrawn, whether it be for climate policies and for climate projects. In New York, you have quite a few $1 billion that have now been put on pause for infrastructure projects as well. So now we wait to see whether Donald Trump is going to use this as an opportunity to weaponize this shutdown to punish Democrat states. Especially, we do know that the midterms are coming up. How will this tilt the political scene before then? So I'm quite interested.
It's
to see
interesting
how they'll
that
resolve
you
this.
mentioned the migrants, because it's one of the facts that was quite jarring to see, is that some of the people some of the agencies that are being kept up and still, you know, their workers still being paid is actually ICE. So I was surprised that, wow, a lot of people are being laid off, but ICE is still, you know, carrying out these migration, you know, sweeps that they are having across the states. So yeah, very well said.
Well,
much
that's
agreed.
one of the big promises of President Donald Trump, so that has to go on. But in general, Americans really frustrated with their government,
yes.
And that's why you hear people talk about draining the park in Washington, D.C., the Congress and the White House, politicians bickering and fighting over one another while the country goes down. All right, let's go to Daily Independent. We'll be seeing more about education there. Uche Azikiwe to governors, emulates Zik, Awo Bello's free education legacy. Uche Azikiwe is the wife of Nigeria's first president, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. She is an emeritus professor of Education Foundation, so she has the bona fide to speak on this. Nigeria needs to go back to those documents that were used to provide free education in the past, she says, and prioritize the sector. Besides, income generation has increased in the trillions, so why not, she advises. We're still reflecting on Nigeria at 65, and that is the context of the statement, looking back at what was versus what is today. It's not debatable that free education is important because it ensures equal access to learning, breaks barriers to poverty, and gives every child the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of background. At least free education at the primary and secondary school, you know, if possible. I mean, in the past, children of people from any background, whether you were poor, middle class, or rich, were able to get that top quality education. But today, it's very expensive. You have to be able to afford private schools. Benga, my question here is it possible to have free education in Nigeria at the primary and secondary school level today, or even to legislate it? I mean, it would be a good thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think the word of the wife of the first president of Nigeria, Uche Azikwe, is quite instructive. There's this saying that if you think education is expensive, try the cost,
Yes.
the tragedy, and the catastrophe of ignorance.
That's right.
It's quite unbearable. There's a price of a big gamble that you don't want to plunge in. Be that as it may, recently former President Obasanjo was talking about out-of-school children being a breeding ground for terrorism.
Yes.
So you
We'll
could
talk
see
about that more in Daily
is
Trust,
one
actually.
high cost. That's one high catastrophe of not providing basic education. So I think it's the responsibility of government at least to provide a basic education from primary school to secondary school, so that we could have the mass enrollment of the young ones, to at least to have that sense of responsibility to have access to education. It is a cardinal imperative that should not be negotiable in any society of the world.
Right. I mean, when you go to developed countries, and Nigeria is aspiring, you know, to be developed, I would imagine primary and secondary school is basic, compulsory free. It means that by the time you graduate from secondary school, if you do not have the funds to go on to tertiary education, it's fine. You can find yourself a job and you can manage with life. So it's very important. Let's look at Daily Sun. A 2027 article opens up, expresses readiness to give way for younger, vibrant candidate. Marks Tinubu's 65th independence address. His reforms crushing against Nigerians, according to ADC. Initially, when I saw this caption, I thought, wonderful, this is great news, only to read it and find out that there is a caveat. He says he will only withdraw from the race if a more vibrant, acceptable candidate emerges at the African Democratic Congress. This means he's still going to slug it out at the primaries, and we know what that means. Deeper pockets usually muscle out others in Nigerian politics. Sorry, let me bring him Vimbai. Your reaction to this, and also his rubbishing of the president's speech at the anniversary.
Yeah, you know, I held my breath when I saw the headline because, you know, when you look at presidential prominent opposition figures who have run for the presidency across Africa, currently Atiku Abubakar leads the pack, I believe, with Raila Odinga coming as a close second. So I said, is it possible that he would really, you know, step down? But of course, all of the presidential aspirants in the ADC have all said that they would support whoever wins. And this is the political rhetoric that we always get around this time in the political season. You know, you have some people who say they'll only do one term. You have some people who say, I'll step down for, you know, everybody is very loving and harmonious when it comes to the bravado that leads up to primaries. So it still stands to be seen how internal democracy of the ADC is going to play out at that very critical juncture, because we know that that will be the ultimate test of the ADC. We know what happened with Atiku Abubakar and the PDP leading up to the 2023 election, and the breakdown that that has caused. Even until date, the PDP has not recovered from that impasse. That, you know, the popular belief was that it was the turn of the South, and then you have a northern candidate emerging, and all that transpired within the party. So, pertinent question is, will he truly accept anything that doesn't favor him? Well, we'll stand to see. On his speech, he said the yam is plentiful, but the pot is empty. And I think that is something that most of us can resonate with. We can disagree with Waziri Abubakar on many things, but truly I think we can all accept that when we go to the markets are brimming with food. So our issue of food security is not so much about the availability of food, but rather the affordability of food. So in that part of his speech, of his response to the president's speech, I think he was in order. However, he went on to criticize how the subsidy was removed. And now this takes us back to that huge debate we continue to have, whether the removal of subsidy should have been sudden or whether it should have been a gradual process. Atiku Abubakar spoke back to his time as vice president, and he said their plan was to remove it in 4 phases. Of course, we know what happened to that plan. It didn't work. You look at countries like Angola that have had protests over the past 2 months because they've been trying to remove their subsidy gradually for the past almost 3 years. It doesn't work. So the question is, what really would have been the best solution? Gradualism or the shock therapy that President Tinubu gave us? We'll never really know. We're living the shock therapy now, and I hope we all make it through it because our pockets are shocked.
More shocks to come. You know, that's my sense. Let's move quickly to New Telegraph. Akpabio to Tinubu. Get ready to receive more opposition governors into APC. And if we look at the second page of that paper, Governor Fubara of Rivers State has disengaged commissioners, others affected by the Supreme Court judgment. Senate President Godswill Akpabio says governors have fallen in love with the ruling All Progressives Congress. According to him, the party is doing well and that the beneficiaries are talking about the good work of the president. Very typical sycophantic messaging, but this is what we have seen, that governors are groveling at the president's feet due to his style of politicking. The other day we saw that report suggesting that the Enugu state government or governor may be considering leaving the PDP, and I think that would be a big fall for the PDP in the southeast. And to Fubara, the Supreme Court had recognized the Martins Amewule faction of the State House of Assembly, meaning that commissioners he appointed and forwarded to his Oko Jumbo faction now have to go. So, Benga, what does this signal to you? And of course, a quick comment on Akpabio very quickly.
Okay. Okay, let me pick on Akpabio first.
Yeah.
I think that, let's be fair, we have a situation where they say figures don't lie. Now we have, people are challenging the government at subnational levels that they now have enough funds to run the state and to embark on a lot of infrastructural projects and development initiatives. That is one point. And it also remains to be seen what's the value of that funds that are made available to government at the subnational level. That's kind of intense the appetite to join the winning team, which for now looks like the ruling party. But be that as it may, when you look deeper into the stark reality, you begin to raise some questions if the oppositions are not being bullied into submission. So in a climate like this, it looks a bit challenging to run the politics of opposition. So you feel that if you can't beat them, you join them, because look at what is happening to the structures of all the political parties. The ADC is entangled with a lot of legal litigation that could crumble its race ahead of the 2027 election. We have a PDP that boasted to rule for 60 years, now facing a threat of implosion, with the soul of the party shaken to its very foundation. And you see someone hobnobbing in the party today, you really do not know the identity. Just recently, the ADC said that the party, Atiku, Peter Obi, must really come out to state the party where they belong to. That shows that for the leading members of this opposition, it raises a lot of political uncertainty for that. I don't know if there's still time to comment on the Rivers State. Okay, I'll leave that for future discussion.
Running, but let's still share some headlines locally before we go to the international. There's Daily Trust, insecurity over 180 schools shot in the north. You know, is just incredible. We know that the northern region is most hit by terrorism, banditry, and kidnapping. We're seeing the consequences: shut down schools for fear of insecurity, and this is a region that already is educationally challenged. So you now see that people are more vulnerable to exploitation, radicalization, and child labor because they would not be getting the education they need. And then to leadership, all unions suspends strike, urges Dangote refinery to honor appointment. And in the Punch, Pengassin strike, NNPC laments losses as union halts action. We go to the Guardian newspaper. Leaders call for reforms on poverty, insecurity, fostering democracy. at Independence, and then Vanguard newspaper finally here. Nigeria at 65 opposition leaders, others take Tinubu to task. And to the International, the Citizen newspaper, jail for Julius could kill EFF after being found guilty of several firearm offenses by a racist magistrate. A defiant Malema wore his conviction like a badge of honor, but can he face 15 years behind bars? And South African ambassador to France and former police chief that was found dead at a hotel in Paris had no bodyguard, says this report. Newspaper this morning, ongoing crackdown on immigration, as we learn that refugees will be stripped of automatic right to have their families join them in the UK. Then the Financial Times, we've seen that American government shutdown and how it's already affecting the country. Finally, to the Guardian newspaper, Jane Goodall, chimpanzee pioneer, dies at 91. Yolanda, over to you.
A lot to unpack there,
yes,
with all those wonderful top stories.
Anyone you can take.
I will start with the Julius Malema story. It's quite unfortunate what has happened, you know. He pulled out a gun. He actually fired shots, and it was said that, you know, he had broken laws by doing that. And he said, no, this was actually a toy gun. And even with that, now he faces, as Dr. Constance rightly said, up to 15 years in prison for firing that weapon at a political rally. So it's really not looking good for him, and I'm pretty sure that the opposition is very much happy. It's also a sad day for Nigerians because, you know, Julius Malema is a very big advocate of, you know, Nigeria and the relations that we have shared over time. If you remember, in August, he was in Enugu for the NBA conference.
Yolanda, don't you think it's weird that his bodyguard who gave him the gun was acquitted?
You know, they still said that the sentencing is in January. So because of that, I am hoping that maybe more facts will come out about that. Because if I'm not mistaken,
the
report is still
a racist magistrate.
Exactly. They're saying it's a racist magistrate, in quote, but we don't really seem to have the full, you know, facts about that. Vimba, you mentioned that the gun was handed to him. Does that make it justifiable?
Well, you know, we can go on to the other stories quickly before we wrap up, if you have comments on the other stories.
Oh, well, the other story that was there, Jane Goodall, that's a very sad loss. It's comforting to know that she passed away from natural causes. I remember as well, you know, a lot of young girls growing up, you know, kind of looked up to her at the time. And she always, you know, made a joke about how she was the original Jane for Tarzan, with her name being Jane. And as well, you know, had the little Barbie doll that was made in commemoration of her. So I mean, I'm glad that she had a very natural passing, and it's good to remember some of the heroes of young girls.
Well, thank you very much, Yolanda, and those were your headlines on the paper review today.